We are going to finish this morning. At least the best we can get to those rich verses at the end. But let's pray together. Gracious Father, my heart's desire now is that the life of liberty and risk and suffering and love that you mean to impel through this truth would happen in these friends. What a tragedy if we heard of this massive security forever and we turned it into human comfort and security when it's meant to release us to lay our lives down for the nations and for the hurting, the suffering, the cities. So I pray for some, especially, Lord, who have come to this place on the brink of change in their lives. Some are pondering significant changes. And I pray, oh God, that you would take hold of them and that those changes would result in unwasted lives. And that you would grant them to pour out their remaining years for the glory of Jesus Christ. So Lord, please don't let the comforts of this chapter produce people who surround themselves with the comforts of this world. May we be freed to live for the age to come. The new heavens and the new earth that will make the Cove look like a slum someday. So grant, I pray, that you would come and do a mighty, world-changing, Christ-exalting, God-centered, Scripture-based, missions-mobilizing, justice-advancing, soul-winning work. Through Christ I pray. Amen. God intends to help us suffer. That's the point, really, of the rest of the chapter. When he introduced here, in order that provided we suffer with him, in order that we may be glorified with him. When he introduced that suffering idea, everything else in this chapter relates to it. And everything is about suffering from here on out. You don't get away from it. We are being killed all day long. We are counted as sheep to be slaughtered. That's what's coming. Neither death, nor life, nor anything else can separate us. Everything else is about suffering. And the realities of the global context in which we live, which is absolutely horrible and will remain horrible until Jesus comes. And we're called to be the freest of all people in this horrible, fallen, futile, decaying, suffering, slaughtering, killing Christian world. We're to be the happiest, freest, most loving, sacrificial people in the world. That's why he's writing this chapter. Not to make you comfortable in your nice, posh places where you feel guilty, but rather to free you to be radically loving, sacrificial, world-changing people. So he's trying to help us suffer here. His first way of helping us, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to us. So it's going to get really good. And everything we're called to go through here will pale in comparison to how good it's going to be. Verse 19, for the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. I said last night, you're going to be revealed. You don't look like sons of God now. You will someday. And the creation waits for that to happen. Then it will step in and be changed and serve you for the rest of eternity. For the creation was subjected to futility. Not willingly. It didn't ask to be. It didn't want to be. But because of him who subjected it in hope. Now that's God, not Satan. And the reason we know it's God is because of that phrase right there. God subjected the creation to futility in hope. Satan had a hand in this, of course, and tempted Eve and brought the whole thing down on our heads. But when God saw that happen, when God saw that sin happen, He brought the whole creation into a fallen condition and sentenced the world to futility. He sentenced the world to misery and groaning and decaying, floods and volcanoes and hurricanes and animals that eat each other up, and all kinds of pain came into the world. It's a mixture of beauty, is it not, and horror, depending on where you focus your attention, whether you have 500,000 people swept away in Bangladesh in a monsoon a few years ago, or whether you relax in the Cove. Where you are depends on which angle of this you see. But this was God, because Satan wouldn't do it in hope. He wants nothing to do with hope. God sentenced judicially the creation, including our bodies, to futility and death. And that's huge. That's part of the global perspective you need to help your people have in order for them to handle their own suffering when it comes. Hope of what? Verse 21. That the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. Now, God's ways are not our ways. This is very strange. If God's aim was that the creation be free from its bondage to decay, then why did He subject it to such futility? I mean, that's a long way around. Why just not go straight there? Why bring thousands of years of horror into existence? Why sentence the world with such a millennia-long suffering if your aim is to bring it out, free it from its bondage to decay? And there are at least two reasons for that. One is we deserve it. And the other is He means for the final creation not just to glorify an obedient Adam and Eve, but to glorify the Redeemer, Jesus Christ. To obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God, and we have become children through what we've been seeing, the great work of Christ on the cross in justification and sanctification and glorification. God means to do a history of redemption. And in that history of redemption, which He planned before the foundation of the world, Christ crucified before the foundation of the world, this plan of redemption, redeeming us out of this horror, was not a plan B after the fall. This was plan A. He knew the fall would happen, and He planned the whole thing around sin and redemption, because in the end, when the new heavens and the new earth happen, and we're all freed in our bodies and freed in our spirits and freed in creation from the futilities and the decays, all of His perfections will shine more brightly because of the history of redemption, including justice and wrath and mercy. I just would like to take you right to the end of Romans 9, or to Romans 9, 20, 21, 22, 23. In fact, I told John Parrish this morning, I said, if I ever came back, I would just like to do Romans 9. And so he said, well, we'll work on it. So the point here is this roundabout way of getting the creation to the freedom for which God destines it, freedom from its bondage to decay. This roundabout way is all about us being the children of God, the revealing of the sons of God. He wanted to create a people for himself, redeemed by the blood of his Son, so that he could demonstrate wrath against all that defames him and demonstrate mercy against the backdrop of that wrath, so that when the whole canvas is written from beginning to end, with all the dark colors and all the horrible, awful pieces, the whole thing from the perspective of eternity would be the perfect display of the perfections of God. And we will bow down and spend an eternity worshiping the God of this redemptive history, including the decay, the futility, and the groaning. Verse 22, for we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. In other words, this hope here is felt all along, just like a woman who she gets sick before she knows she's pregnant. Now, my wife never did. She's born to bear babies. She never had a day of morning sickness in her life. But she got heavy in the end, and it was really big, and we had 10-pound babies. And to see a Piper baby is a phenomenon. Just big. We used to call them beached whales. It's before they could walk. So I have tasted this. I've been with her in 3 of our children's births, and there's pain, but it's so full of hope, except in some of the tragic situations that perhaps some of you have been involved in, and I've, as a pastor, had to walk women through who've carried dead babies for 3 months and then given birth to them. So I don't mean to say it's always full of hope, but you know what the Bible is trying to say here. It's meant to be a beautiful thing. Usually it is a beautiful thing, and that's creation. Creation's like a pregnant woman. Jesus said the same thing. Remember when he said there's going to be floods and there's going to be famines? These are but the beginning of the birth pangs. Jesus said that, the beginning. Mark 13:8. So all that's about hope. All the suffering you see in the world right now, including your own suffering, interpret them as birth pangs. Get your whole mindset shifted into a global birthing process for the new heavens and the new earth and new bodies. It's going to raise you from the dead. This is all about bringing forth the children of God and a creation that is appropriate and suitable for the children of God. 23. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. In this hope we were saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Now, what I want you to see here is how Paul is trying to help us with what we do see as not the main reality. And what we do see is our body decaying. There are a number of you who are old enough to have tasted much suffering, and you know it's coming. And you see that. That's what you see. That's real. And what you don't see is hope. It wouldn't be hope if you saw it. You see how he's trying to help us with this intense reality of our fallenness, our futility, our groaning, our decay. We can see that so clearly, so much hurt, so much pain in our families, in our bodies. And he's trying to help us not become health, wealth, and prosperity wackos. Because the health, wealth, and prosperity wacko movement, it's all over the TV, does not grasp the progressive nature of salvation and the stages in which we are saved and the not yet of redemption. They are over-realized in their eschatology. We're kingdom kids. We don't get sick. We expect, because our hand gets healed, that our daughter should be healed. And it ain't necessarily so. And that's what this text is about. This is, to me, this verse 23 here is just absolutely foundational. I think the second or third sermon I preached when I came to my church in 1980 was called Christ and Cancer, because I wanted my people to know what I would think about them when I came to the hospital when they were sick. Would I think, what's wrong with your faith? Or would I think you're part of a fallen, decaying, groaning, futile creation, and God's will is sometimes to heal, and let's ask Him for it. Don't let James 4 be your portion. You have not because you ask not. But when you ask once, like the Apostle Paul, ask twice, like the Apostle Paul, ask 3 times, and the thorn is not taken away, don't get mad at God. God has His purposes for why He heals some, doesn't heal others, but here's for the non-healed. Not only the creation, but we ourselves. Now, in the Greek, he stresses, it goes, I'll give you a literal translation. We ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves. There's this emphasis on we, meaning he knows that some wackos are going to say, hey, we've got the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is omnipotent. The Holy Spirit can do anything He pleases. He can take away my disease. Therefore, He will. I just need to have enough faith. Paul is directly addressing that person in this verse. He's directly addressing that person in this verse by saying, even we who have the first fruits, that's all they are, is first fruits, not the fullest measure, the first fruits of the Spirit. He's all here, but He's not going to do all His work yet. You will be raised from the dead, verse 11, through the Spirit who dwells in you. He's got His timing. He moves in now and forgives all your sins. He moves in now and begins to cause you to walk according to the Spirit and love people. He moves in now and then heals you from a disease. And He moves in now and gives you patience to wait until you get your new body after you die. And He will not take away death. And I have seen many great saints die hard deaths. Ruth Fast was one of the hardest. Her tongue turned black like a cinder. One of the sweetest, deepest praying women in our church, crying out, take me, take me, take me. I don't want to be naive about your coming sufferings. I want to help you suffer. That's what this chapter is all about. So we groan. Oh, do we groan? Inwardly, waiting. How long, O Lord, until I get a new body? We need to really love people. We need to really get alongside people who are called to suffer. If you're not suffering, you're called to someone who's suffering. Okay. So far, He's helping us suffer. Skip the passage. Where is it? Where's my likewise passage? There it is. Likewise. I'm helping you, teaching you the big global perspective of suffering, telling you to be patient, to wait. God has His purposes. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. And that word weakness in several places in the New Testament means sickness. I'm inclined to think it's referring back to the groaning and the weakness of our bodies, our minds. Psychological weakness and suffering is some of the worst, right? For we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words, and He who searches the hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. What don't we know to pray? What don't we know to pray? I know a lot of things that I must and should pray for. I should pray for patience in suffering. I should pray for healing. I should pray for love and kindness and meekness and humility. I know lots of things. I'm not ignorant about what to pray for. The Bible is so full of things that we ought to be and do. How can you be ignorant about what to pray? And we are. There's something we're ignorant of here. What would that be? We don't know how or what to pray as we ought. And the Spirit steps in at those times and intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. What don't we know how to pray for? Answer: we don't know God's secret will in our suffering. We know His revealed will. Be patient, be loving, be kind, be humble. But we don't know His secret will. Will we get well? Will our daughter get well? Will our children get well? Are we in an Apostle Paul situation of a thorn in the flesh, and I'd like it to be taken away, and he doesn't know for a season whether it's going to be taken away, and in the end it wasn't taken away. And I'm sure Paul groaned. We groan, not knowing what we ought, but the Spirit intercedes for us. He knows the will of God, and He prays for us with groanings. Whose groanings are those? The Spirit doesn't need to groan. He knows exactly what He's praying for. He's God. He has not one bit of ignorance or frustration. There's no groaning except insofar as in us, we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan. Same word. And the creation is groaning. We're groaning, and now the Spirit is groaning. My understanding of how the Spirit groans is exactly the way He bears witness that we are the children of God. There's a parallel here. We cry, Abba, Father, the Spirit Himself bearing witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. So, the witness of the Spirit that we are the children of God is the Spirit's birthing of a heartfelt Abba, Father. And I think here the Spirit's praying is the birthing of Godward groaning. I mean, I can imagine in your lives that you've been in situations, financial situations, physical situations, relational situations, and you just don't know what God means to do. And you're not sure what the will of God, as Scripture defines it, would imply. And you just, now what do you do at that moment? Do you get angry? Do you just get frustrated? Do you seethe? If the Spirit moves, at those moments He comes in and He groans Godward. Because He hasn't chosen to reveal you what the will of God is at this point for your future. And all you know to do is, God, I don't know. And those groanings are the Spirit's groanings in and through you. I don't think this is speaking in tongues, by the way. That's just the farthest thing from Paul's mind here. The people that take the groanings here as praying in the Spirit, meaning speaking in tongues, it's just off the wall, because the context is clear from verse 23 and verse 22 that the groanings are real groanings. They're not speaking in tongues. These are groanings for people whose bodies are aching, and they are waiting the redemption of their bodies, and they don't know if they're going to get healed, if they're going to die, or whether they should take a risk to go to the mission field, or whether they should try to avoid going to prison or take the risk to get in prison. They don't know what to do, and their hearts are just aching Godward. And in those achings, God is listening to the Spirit. who is saying, let's do this for this groaning saint. That would be really good for them. And he hears and he does it. That's my understanding of the groaning. Let me read you a text from, I might have brought the wrong sheet, so I can't read it. I was going to read you a text from, oh yeah, there it is. John Bunyan. Bunyan, remember, spent 12 years in prison. What makes the 12 years in prison so painful for Bunyan was that he had children, and he had one daughter who was blind. Her name was Mary. So he has this little daughter who's blind and needs her daddy. Bunyan could have gotten out of prison anytime he wanted by simply signing that he wouldn't preach. He chose to stay in prison. Now tell me that was an easy choice. The Bible doesn't say go to prison and don't take care of your family if it means you can't preach. The Bible leaves sort of some leeway there. It says if you don't take care of your family, you're worse than an unbeliever. And it says don't do what man says do what God says do. And if God says preach, preach. And if they put you in jail, let them put you in jail. Now, that was not an easy choice for John Bunyan. Nor all over the world today for missionaries are the degrees of risk that they take easy decisions. I get regular emails from our missionaries. I got one from Turkey while I was preaching this series of messages saying we've got choices about how we do our book table that put us at varying degrees of risk of being thrown out of the country or put in jail. One of our missionaries did spend time in jail in Turkey. How do you make these decisions? Listen to Bunyan. He's talking about whether you run and escape persecution or whether you stay and accept it. Thou mayest do what is in thy heart. If it is in thy heart to fly, fly. If it be in thy heart to stand, stand. Anything but in denial of the truth. He that flies has warrant to do so. He that stands has warrant to do so. Yea, the same man may fly and stand as the call and working of God with his heart may be. Moses fled, Exodus 2. Moses stood, Hebrews 11. David fled, 1 Samuel 19. David stood, 1 Samuel 24. Jeremiah fled, Jeremiah 37. Jeremiah stood, Jeremiah 38. Christ withdrew himself, Luke 19. Christ stood, John 18. Paul fled, 2 Corinthians 11. Paul stood, Acts 20. There are few rules in this case. The man himself is best able to judge concerning his present strength and what weight this or that argument has upon his heart to stand or to fly. Do not fly out of a slavish fear, but rather because flying is an ordinance of God, opening a door of escape for some, which door is opened by God's providence, and the escape countenanced by the word of God. In other words, life is complex. And when we groan over indecision about to fly or to stand, the Spirit prays. And God's goodwill for you gets done. And it is always a good will for you. Now, finally, verse 28. Everybody's favorite verse. And we know it's just an and. You don't have to worry with a for here. No therefore, just an and. Meaning, I think, likewise the Spirit helps us in our weakness. And here's some more help. That's all he's doing for the rest of this chapter is helping you suffer. That's all he's doing, is helping you suffer. So that you can walk right into the prison or into the mouth of the lion, if it's the will of God as you discern it, and not worry whether you die or not. That's what he's trying to do. And we know that for those who love God, All things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. So let's ask three questions. First, what's the good? Second, what's the love of God and why is that mentioned here? Third, what is calling? And we'll spend that much time there because that will help us answer the rest of the text. The good. God works all things together for your good. The immediate context would answer conformity to the image of his Son. That's the good. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed. And here the word for is important. All things work together for your good because God predestined the foreknown to be like his Son. So contextually, the essential answer to what the good is that he's always doing for you is bringing you toward Christ's likeness. And someday, don't interpret that in a small moral way. Moral is big and good and beautiful. If I were morally like Jesus, I'd be, whoa, that would be not small. But also realize he has risen from the dead. He has a glorified body. He is at the right hand of the Father. He rules. He's coming so that when he appears, people will fall on their face. To be conformed to the image of the Son is big. It's really big. You're going to shine like the kingdom, like the sun, S-U-N, in the kingdom of your Father. So that's the goal. Now, I don't think you should limit the word good to that in this context because everything else in this text, I think, is filling up what the good is. And we're going to see all things are yours in him. No condemnation in him. God is for you in him. Nothing can separate you from God in him. The word good here is, I believe, all-embracing. It is good as God sees good. And if we could believe that every day and every hour of our lives, that every red light, every missed parking place, every failed appointment, every broken brake and clutch, every sass from your child, it's going to work for your good. Every broken heart, every disease, every failed relationship, I don't think there's any limit to this word. I don't think it excludes sin. Now, don't do like Romans 6 here and say, oh, let us sin then, that more things may work for good. That's what the objector said in Romans 6:1. And Paul did not like it. But that will have to be another Cove event. Chapter 6. Just don't do that. That includes everything. Now, what does love of God mean? Somebody wrote me a note and said, why does it say love God instead of trust God? I don't know the answer to that question. I think he could have said trust God and it would be a true statement. But he said love, so let's just think about love. If you know the answer, you can tell me. He said love God. Those who love God. All things don't work together for good for everybody. Some people go to hell. All things work together for good for those who love God. I don't think it means, by the way, too, this same person asked this question, I don't think it means some days you love God and things go good, and some days you don't love God and things go bad. I think it means here's a person whose lifestyle is love to God, just like trust to God. And everything, in their good days and bad days, is working for their good. Love God here, I think, means cherish God, delight in God, treasure God. It's not work for God. If your heart has been awakened so that you're no longer insubordinate and rebellious, chapter 8, verse 7, but you now are submissive and approving, affirming, delighting, rejoicing in God for who God is. To love God is not mainly to love His gifts, like forgiveness. It's mainly to love Him because He's beautiful. It's glorious. Now here I want to ask a little tough catch-22 question. I used to struggle with Romans 8:22, putting a problem to myself like this. I have to love God in order for Romans 8:22 to be valid for me. And it needs to be valid for me so that I can love God. That's the way I used to think. And I was trapped in a catch-22. I will love Him if it's true for me. And I have to love Him so it'll be true for me. And you're trapped. There's no way out of that until you get love right. If you say, this text must be true for me before I will love Him, it won't be true for you. Loving God is not loving His working everything together for your good first. This is heavy. This is big. There's a lot of professing Christians who don't love God and are not saved. Salvation is having your heart awakened to see God as the kind of God who is just and merciful and true and powerful and gracious and wrathful. And when you see it, you love it. And because you love Him for who He is, then all things work together for your good. If you say to God, if you turn this tragedy for my good, I'll love you, you've backed out of Romans 8:28. Because you've reversed the order. You love Him, and then things work together for your good. And don't misunderstand me. I believe it's right to love God because He works all things together for your good also. There are a lot of Psalms that talk that way, right? I love you, O Lord, because you hear my prayer. Well, if that's the only reason you love Him, then probably He's not hearing your prayer. You must see Him displayed in the gospel as a glorious God, mingling all the excellencies of holiness and mercy, and be drawn out to love and delight in Him. And then, in that new spiritual condition, everything works together for your good. What does called mean? This talks about your response and act. This talks about God's response and act. He's coming at it. The people for whom all things work together for good are people who are acted upon by God and people who act toward God a certain way. The act towards God is love. Now the acted upon by God is called. What does that mean? This is absolutely crucial for what's coming in those who are called or justified, those who are justified or glorified, and so on. So I'm going to put this text to define called from 1 Corinthians 1:22. The Jews demand signs, Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews, folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Now think hard with me for 2 minutes on this text. There are two calls in this text. One of them is mentioned and the other is implicit. Jews demand sign, Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. That's Billy Graham to 50,000 people. Billy Graham calls people to Christ. Come to Christ. Come to Christ, and you will be saved. Everybody is called in that sense. Everybody who comes under the gospel is called. Come to Christ. That's the way we ought to preach. No, don't let the doctrine of election make you a hyper-Calvinist. Hyper-Calvinist is a technical phrase that means you only call the elect to salvation, and you try to sniff out who they are. That's never in the Bible. The Bible says be indiscriminate in your love. Be indiscriminate in your preaching, in your summoning to salvation. Call everybody, and whosoever wills may come. That's clearly true. So here's a call, and it's general, but it's not this call. When Billy Graham calls, there's some Jews out there who stumble. There's some Gentiles out there who say, that's stupid. But to those who are called, they say, Christ, you're the power of God. You're the wisdom of God. I come. I come. There are two kinds of call. A general call. Now, what shall we call this one? You Calvinists know the name of it. Effectual call. There are different names for it. This call effects what it demands. Here are the words going out of Billy's mouth. They're landing on 50,000 hearts. And here's the Holy Spirit coming down, and in some, he calls. And the effect of the call, and it is an irresistible effect, is they recognize Christ as the power of God, the wisdom of God. That's how I got saved. That's how you got saved. And like I said yesterday, you don't have to know that to be saved. But I'm telling you now, that's how you got saved. You were called two ways. You heard a gospel or read a tract or heard a radio message or saw a TV program or looked at a Billy Graham film. You heard a message. That's a general call. Thousands of people hearing it with you. And something happened. Don't take credit for that. Say, thank you for calling me. Here's an analogy. Jesus stood before the grave of Lazarus, and he said, Lazarus, come forth. Now, Lazarus was dead, and the call created the obedience. Jesus said, come. And when Jesus speaks effectually, his call creates the obedience. And that's what this means. And that's what this means. Those who are called according to his purpose, and I'd love to take you on a tour of that word in Paul, but it's his electing purpose, his purpose to predestine you. So, if you say to me, how can I know if I've been effectually called? The answer is, you see Christ as the wisdom of God. You see Christ as the power of God, and you love God. You don't look around inside of you, where's the evidence of my call? Where's the voice? Where's the call? You just say, do I love him? If I love him, I'm called. And then you give God the glory for how you got to be that way. All things work together for good because those whom he foreknew, he predestined. Now we're starting into this chain that's going to go from predestining to call to justified to glorified. So we got foreknow, predestined, called, justified, glorified. This is a chain. This is the most glorious, steel, unbreakable, hope-giving, heart-securing chain in the Bible. Let your heart be made firm by this chain. Get fiber in the tree of your faith by this chain. Be a solid Christian by this chain. Oh, there's so many flimsy Christians because they don't know this chain, this sequence, this building block of foreknowledge, predestination, calling, justification, and glorification. Let's start with foreknow. What does that mean? The ways divide here. I'll tell you how Arminians understand it and how I understand it. One way to take this would be, okay, He's going to predestine us, His called ones, to be like Jesus. That's the content of predestination, to be like Jesus. He's destining us. And when He destines us, it happens. But before that, it's those whom He foreknew that He does that to. And foreknowledge is foreseen faith, which I, by my autonomous, self-determining free will, produce, so that predestination then is a response to my autonomous, self-determining decision to believe. That's one view. It's called Arminianism. It will not work in this text. And you don't need to grasp for any theological presupposition. It just won't work. And here's the reason it won't work. If this refers to autonomously produced, self-determined, human will creating faith that God then sees, oh, that's good, I approve of that, and then backs up in His foreknowledge and predestines, then what becomes of the connection between calling and justification? Those whom He called, here it is, those whom He called, He justified. Everybody that He calls, He justifies. How can that be? Justification is by faith alone. How can He say, everybody that I call, I justify, when in fact we must produce the act of faith so that we can be justified, which we do. I'm not saying faith is not your act. I'm simply saying it's a gift of God. And this connection won't work if it's not the gift of God. Those whom He called, He justified, has to assume the calling produces the faith, guarantees the faith. Otherwise, there are a few people in the called here who shouldn't be justified because they don't believe. Justification is always by faith alone. And He's saying all the called get justified. So all the called must believe. And the only way that can be secured is if the call produces the faith. If it's all dependent on you and God can't govern whether you believe or not, then He could not say all the called are justified. So just from the context alone, I argue, no, faith is not autonomously produced by a self-determining human volition which God has nothing decisive to do with. That's just not biblical. Ephesians 2:8, the gift of God. Faith is the gift of God. Philippians 1:29, we are called and we are given not only to suffer but to believe. We are given to believe. 2 Timothy 2:25, may they repent if God perchance will grant them repentance. And over in the Bible, your faith is the work of God. Now, back up. Well, what then in the world does foreknowledge mean? And here's the background of the word foreknow. Genesis 18:19. I have chosen him. Now I wish the versions did not translate that chosen, because I even put the Hebrew for you here, for the few of you who can see it. Yadat. Tiva. I knew him. I have known him. So let's translate it literally. I have known him that he may command his children. But the translators are right to interpret it as chosen. I have known him. I've chosen him from all the people that he may command his children after me. Amos 3:2, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. What does that mean? God doesn't know about the Edomites? Oh, they're Edomites. I didn't know they were Edomites. That you only have I known. That is, I have acknowledged, I have set my favor and my care. I have known you like this. Adam knew Eve and she conceived. This word know is a drawing near, a setting of favor upon, an affection and love and care. Psalm 1:6, the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. What, he doesn't know the way of the wicked? He doesn't know what wicked people are doing? Of course he does. This word know means I know the way of the righteous, means I acknowledge it, I favor it, I like it, I care for it, I set it aside. That's my way. Or Matthew 7:23, then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you lawless ones. Never knew them? Never knew they existed? Of course he knew they existed. Never knew what they were doing? Of course he knows what they're doing. What does know mean? It means I never had a relationship with you. I never acknowledged you. You were not mine. That's what I think foreknown means. It's not stretching it at all. In fact, most commentators, if you read them, will take that position. I would translate this to mean God, before the foundation of the world, did this. Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? If you ask, well, where does the election happen in that chain? It happens right there. That's just another word for it. Those whom he chose, knew beforehand in a loving relationship, he predestined to be like Jesus, the firstborn among, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. That's remarkable. What that means is there's a Christ-exalting, Christ-centeredness to your conformity to Jesus. God wants this group right here to become many brethren like Jesus for a reason, so that Jesus might be the supreme brother. He wants you to become the family with an elder brother so that the supremacy and the primacy of Jesus might be manifest by many admiring younger brothers. So don't think you're the center here. Jesus is still the center. Verse 30. And those whom he predestined to that destiny of Christlikeness, he called. And we've seen that. Now, we move from eternity. We got two eternal acts, foreknowledge and predestination. And now we enter into history, and he calls. So God, according to his, I chose them, I've destined them, and now I will go and move by my power and my spirit and my word into their lives and call them to myself. And then those whom he called, he justified. We've seen what that is. Declared righteous on the basis of the work of Christ. And those whom he justified, he glorified. And amazingly, it's past tense. That's how sure it is. That's what this chapter is about. This chapter is about rock solid surety that makes steel people. I've written poems for my wife, and one of my favorite images that I've used for her is velvet steel. That's the kind of woman I have married. No nonsense, not too much affection and emotion. She's not impressed with John Piper in the least. Very impressed with Jesus. Steel, unshakable. We go to the mission field, she eats the bugs. And since we're one flesh, I tell my host, that's good enough. That's good. That's good. You can keep the fish head. Past tense, because it's done, folks. It's as good as done for you. You're not going to fall out. He's not going to let you fall out. He's going to keep you. If I had time, I would take this word calling and take you to all the places. Do this word study when you get home. Go and look for the places in Paul, and that word calling is connected with keeping. Those he calls, he keeps. So we're going to be glorified. What then should we say to these things? That's a good question to ask. Speechless we are almost. What should we say to these things? If God is for us, and that's a good way to summarize everything so far in Romans 8, He's for you, He's not against you. He's always for you. When the sickness comes, He's for you. When the car wreck happens, He's for you. When you lose your job, He's for you. Believe these things and you will be a strong person. If God is for us, who can be against us? What's the answer to that question? Nobody. Well, that's stupid, right? Everybody's against us. What does he mean? What do you mean, nobody? You're right. That's the answer I would have given. He means for you to say nobody. Who can be against us? Nobody. What? Let's jabbering away with theological nonsense. Let's get real. Jesus said, they'll hate you everywhere. They'll kill you. They'll put you in prison. What do you mean nobody's against you? So what word would you put at the end of nobody can be against me? What? That matters. I'd put the word successfully. Nobody can be successfully against me. Of course they can kill me. So what? Do you remember what Jesus said? Do not fear those who can kill the body and after that have nothing more that they can do. Fear him who can cast both soul and body into hell, which I paraphrase as, fear not, you can only be killed. That's exactly what this chapter is trying to breed into you. You should become the most dangerous, radical, life-laying down people on planet Earth. Not to blow yourself up in a cafe, but to lay yourself down to save the guy who blows himself up in a cafe. Christian martyrdom is very different than Islamic martyrdom. We do not kill. We die in love. So I'm real sensitive to saying that I'm calling for martyrs, which I am, because of 9/11 and all the martyrs we watch, killing people by their martyrdom. That is not Christian martyrdom. We have a totally different way. When we contemplate laying our lives down, we do it for our enemies, that they might see the way they are loved by Christ. That's what Christian martyrdom is about, and it is so different, and may there be enough of us so that the Islamic world recognizes that Christianity is superior. I heard George Otis say one time in Manila at Lausanne II, maybe we're not making the headway in the Islamic world the way we should because there aren't enough martyrs. I hear so many Christians talk about missions. Well, is it safe to take your children there? Nobody can be against us successfully because everything's going to work for our good. We'll see more of that in just a minute. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how shall he not also with him graciously give us all things? Notice the logic of heaven there. Got a whole chapter in Future Grace on this verse. Since he didn't spare his own son, argue now. Argue with that. Preach to yourself with that. And what's the argument? Therefore. Here's an implicit therefore. Therefore, he will most certainly graciously give us all things. It's just another Romans 8:28 stated another way. If he didn't spare his own son, he won't spare anything to bring me to himself. He will give me everything I need. And I understand Matthew 6:33, all these things will be added to you. And Philippians 4:19, my God will supply all your needs according to his riches and glory. I understand that against the backdrop of this. All things. Where is it? Gave up themselves. All things. Now you may say all things, well, why not the healing for my child? Or why not the rescue of my marriage? Or why not a new job? This is, again, qualified by all things that are best for you. All things that are best for you. Just like there can be people who are against us, but nobody can be against us successfully. All things are yours, but not everything you necessarily feel like having. All things that are best for you. All things work together for your good. Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? That's right. No one, well, yes, they will. Successfully, no charge can be made to stick anymore. Why? Because God is the Supreme Court. And when God vindicates, there is no appeal. There's no appeals court after heaven's courtroom. And you have been delivered the verdict. Not guilty. No condemnation. So we're winding up where we began. No condemnation. Sure, there's going to be from the corner some rascal lawyer's going to say, objection! Did you see what they did last night? Satan will do that over and over again to you. You'll try to preach this to yourself and say, there's no condemnation. No charge can be made to stick against me. Nobody can condemn me. And Satan will say, after what you just did? Who are you kidding? Oh, the preciousness of the Word of God to slay the devil. Memorize Romans 8 so that you can defeat the lies of the devil that come upon you when you sin and when you're suffering. Who is going to condemn? I skipped one, didn't I? Who should bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies, and nobody can make an appeal after that. Who is to condemn? And then he gives you a fourfold confidence in not having condemnation. Christ died. And you remember verse 3? He died to condemn sin. Your sin, not his sin. He died. He was raised. Number 2. So the death didn't conquer him. He didn't stay in the grave as though, I guess it didn't really work. He tried to die for you. He gave himself, and now he's smoldering in the grave, and so it really didn't work. So he's risen to vindicate the success of his sacrifice. He is at the right hand of God, and we know from Psalm 110 what that means. Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. So what he's doing at the right hand, he's not playing tiddlywinks. He is ruling and bringing all the enemies of his people under his feet. Today he rules in Iraq. Today he rules in Russia and Indonesia and South Africa and Australia. He is ruling from the right hand of God. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, and I'm ready to release you now in just a few minutes. Now go! You feel the sense of what this chapter is supposed to breed into your life in the face of all suffering, all persecution, and all imperfection in your own life. The unbelievable confidence that should reign in the life of a sinful, non-condemned Christian. And fourth, he is interceding for us. So, 1, he died. 2, was raised. 3, he's reigning. 4, he's praying. Remember Hebrews 7:25. He is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, because he ever lives to make intercession for them. And if you say, well, why does he need to intercede since we are justified by faith in the crucified and risen Christ? Isn't it the cross? Isn't it the death? Isn't it the resurrection that secures us? Why this intercession? All he's doing in interceding is daily pleading his blood. He's daily, as it were, the living, present, triumphant emblem in the face of a righteous judge that the debt has been paid. That's what he's doing. And he's just saying to the Father over and over again, that sin I covered. That sin I covered. That sin I covered. Watch me, Father. See them in me, Father. That sin I covered. That's how he's interceding for us. What a precious doctrine. Well, if I've lost the last one, I should be shot dead. Here it is. We're out of time, but we're going to read it. And we're going to say the last words. Who then shall separate us from the love of Christ? Wait a minute. Oh, yeah, that's good. Who then shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? Now, I can imagine a health, wealth, and prosperity person, name it and claim it kind of person, says, well, all that says is, can any of that separate us from the love of God? And no, it won't, because it won't happen to you. If you just believe him, you won't have famine. You won't go hungry. You won't lose your clothes. You'll always have really nice clothes. There's one problem with that, and it's the next verse. As it is written, for your sake we, not might be, and not like the NIV says, are facing death, weak. We are being killed. That's happening today in the world. And it'll happen to some of you if you're faithful. We are being killed all day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. This is Christian life. This great commission for which Billy Graham and this Cove and the whole organization and the Christian church stands for, this great commission will not be completed without that happening. Blood will flow for Christ's sake, and the world will see how much we love him and what his love looks like. No, but in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. How can you be more than a conqueror? Isn't conqueror good enough? What's more than a conqueror? Super conqueror? What is super? What's super about this conquering? Here's what I think it is. When you're a valiant, strong general leading your troops in victory, you can conquer a foe. Smash them down. Kill them. Or you can take them captive and make them serve you the rest of their life. That'd be more than victory. That's what this means, I think. And I'm not just guessing at that. Distress, tribulation, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, sword are defeated and taken captive and made to serve the good of the saints, because Romans 8:28 says so. All things, tribulation works for your good. Distress works for your good. Persecution works for your good. Famine will work for your good. Nakedness will work for your good. Danger will work for your good. Sword will work for your good. They have been made your servants. Because I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels nor rulers, all the hosts of the devil, nor things present, nor anything that might come, nor any supernatural powers or earthly powers, nor anything high, nor anything deep. Scary places high, scary places deep, nor anything in all the created order will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. The love of God is invincible. Everything here is meant to help you valiantly suffer. I'll be back in just a few minutes to send you on your way, but just let me pray. Father, as we worship for a few minutes here and then dismiss, come and make us strong, velvet steel, unshakable in the face of suffering.